Welcome to the Beacon Hill Fellowship. Good morning. Good morning. Whether you're a longtime member or you're a guest visiting with us for the first time, we're glad you chose to join us here for worship and to fellowship together. You know, you may be looking for a church home. You may be wondering if there's a place where you can be accepted and cared for. Well, the Beacon Hill Fellowship is just that kind of place. This is a place where you can come as you are and not as you have been told you should be. This is a place where we see you as a person, created by God and loved by Jesus. Here you matter, here you can belong, and here you can find a purpose. Because here we believe in the power of unconditional love, as inspired by Jesus, who embraces all people without the limitations of labels and conditions. We have an ethos that reflects these values. We like to say, or we do say our ethos together each week as a congregation to remind ourselves and our guests of how we see each other, not just here at church and not just on Sundays, but as we go out into the community, wherever we may be, 7 days a week, always trying to be the presence of Christ. So I invite you to join me in reading our ethos statement together. Married, divorced, or single here, it's one family that mingles here. Conservative or liberal here, we've all got to give a little here. Big and small here, there's room for us all here. Doubt or believe here, we all can receive here. LGBTQ and straight here, there's no hate here. Non-binary, woman and man here, everyone can here. Whatever your race here, for all of us grace here. An imitation of the remarkable love Almighty God has for each of us and all of us. Let us live and love without labels.
May the peace of Christ be with you.
And also with you.
Let's pray. Loving and gracious God, we come to this place to worship you because we love you, because you're our creator, redeemer, and sustainer. In our hearts, we know that we love you and want to do your will and please you in all that we do and say. But we know that the spirit is willing and the flesh is weak. We pray that in this quiet hour, we'll recommit ourselves to doing your will and to pleasing you with all we do and say and exemplify the life of Christ through ours. Forgive us when we fail you. Help us to overcome our errors, our mistakes, our failures, and our commissions of sin, so that we might better exemplify what you would have us to be as your children. We pray this in the name of Christ. Amen.
Confidence and peace. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you for that song. I love that song. It's a beautiful song. It calls for our partnership and our working together as a community of faith to see God's inbreaking kingdom become a greater reality in more people's lives and more people's experiences. And I'm glad you've come to this place today to join us in worship on this Lord's Day. It's a time each week when we come together to celebrate our faith in God and also think about the implications of that faith for how we live our lives the rest of the week. And so thank you for being a part of this service.
This is one of my favorite scriptures. It's 1 Corinthians 13, and it is the newest one, so it's a smidge different. If I speak in the tongues of humans and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious, or boastful, or arrogant, or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never ends, but as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see only a reflection, as in a mirror. But then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part. Then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love remain, these three, and the greatest of these is love. It is written, thanks be to God.
Thank you, Kathy, for that reading. It is a powerful word of Scripture written by the Apostle Paul right in the middle of a conflicted Christian community in the city of Corinth. That's where it gets the name Corinthians. Some of these names sound strange to us, but many of you know ancient history, you're familiar with the city of Corinth, a large commercial city at the time, which was very diverse, different perspectives. And that also infected the church with different perspectives and ideas and beliefs. And Paul said at the end of the day, when we put aside all the gifts we have that differ from one another, even the knowledge and the way we look at things that are different from one another, and all the diversity that we have in our Christian community, in our world, Paul said, you can really understand the most important thing of all is to love one another. He says it's the greatest of these. Even greater than faith, either greater than any hope we have, the love we have for one another. I believe the greatest challenge for our world is to learn how to live in loving community with one another, even when we disagree, even when we don't see eye to eye. Today, on this last Sunday of Pride Month, as you look around, you see the Beacon Hill Fellowship has celebrated Pride Month in a lot of different ways, from hosting the Pride and Faith service during Pride Week here, to having our booth at the Pride in the Park, as we've done each year for a long time, and simply highlighting some of the ways that we as a congregation can be welcoming and affirming to people who are LGBTQ+. And today, as we culminate this time together and re-emphasize what we talked about in the reading, love, and you see on this banners to my right and to my left, we believe in the end that love is what will win. And one of the ways we love one another is to better get to know one another and to hear people's stories of their own walk in faith, regardless of who they are. And we'll find in their stories, I think, some of our own. And how that we can celebrate our differences and be a congregation that's trying to bring people together by building bridges to the diverse community that we have just outside our door, to also recognizing we have a diverse community right inside our doors. And that, as I heard someone say, be careful who you hate. It might be somebody you love. And today, as we conclude our emphasis on celebrating Pride, I wanted to have a panel discussion with people who are close to our congregation, who are, in this case, gay and lesbian, married, as we'll see, and they're going to share out of their experience. And I've invited them to come up. If you will come now, and we're glad to have Carrie and Michelle and James and Carly. Many of you, all of you, I think, if you're a guest here, know them already, have had an opportunity to meet them. And as they make their way to their seats, the way we're going to do this today is I've just asked each one, Clark's going to bring up the microphone, we're going to ask each one to kind of open up with a statement. And the question that I asked them to address is, just tell us about, as a gay or a lesbian person, how spirituality and faith have impacted your life, either for good or for bad. As we know, both are a part of the experience of many people who are gay or lesbian. And to share just a little bit about their faith journey, I've kind of asked them to limit this opening statements to a couple of minutes each so that we can move through this, because I want to give you an opportunity, if you have a question, to address as well. And then I have a final question that I want them to address, and that's specifically, how can we as a church, or how can churches in general, be more welcoming and affirming to people who are gay or lesbian? So I don't know who has the microphone first. Carly, you drew the straw. So if you'd like to start us off, you see their names there. You have Carly Gustafson. I think we misspelled your name up there, your last name. I think there's an A missing, aren't we?
There is an A missing,
Yeah,
but that's okay.
That's all right. But if you'll start us off, and we'll just move down the table, okay?
So you just want me to do the intro or answer
Yeah,
that
just
first
introduce.
question?
Tell me about your experience as a when it comes to faith and spirituality, maybe a little bit about your own past and history of that, and how maybe being a person who is lesbian has helped or hurt in that journey.
Okay, awesome. So, my name is Carly. I am 29. I grew up Southern Baptist, and then in college started attending non-denominational churches. And now I make sure that it's an affirming church over a specific denomination. I have been with my partner for 6 years, and Tim actually officiated our wedding last year.
Right before a thunderstorm started,
Right before a thunderstorm started, yes. As far as my experience being gay with my religion and faith, spirituality, I grew up being taught that homosexuality is a sin, and after I came out and in required counseling, was told that any repetitive sin will keep you from inheriting the kingdom of God. And this was extremely hard for me at the time because I knew it wasn't something I could change. I never stopped believing in God or the Bible, but I did start to question things more in terms of context. Once I found more peace with my religion, sexuality, and starting to rebuild my relationship with God, the next struggle was the separation that I felt with those closest to me who condemned it, and on what they felt was on behalf of God. It was hard for me to feel like our God is what stood between the great relationship and bond that we used to have. But going to an affirming church and just affirming environments in general has been a huge part of me keeping my faith.
Good. Thank you. All right. Go ahead, James Allison. Go ahead, James. Good to know you and good to hear from you.
Thank you. My name is James Allison. I've been attending for several weeks now. Thank you for the wonderful welcome. I was raised in church, American Baptist Church. I was, as you would say, born again when I was 11 years old, baptized in a very cold lake, and worked hard. My goal in life was to become a pastor of a Baptist church and have a big family. And I was in college before I ever realized that I was actually gay. It was, I had ideas, but anyway, it wound up, I eventually said something to one of my mission buddies, and he took it to the president of the school, and I ended up on the street of the school, that is. My family has always been very supportive. I have had different opportunities to work in ministries here and in North Carolina, a couple of mission trips to Mexico. My faith in God, my relationship with Christ was banged up a little bit after college. I kind of blamed God instead of the people who were representing him. But a friend who loved me very dearly and was a good Christian man kind of steered me around. And now it is the primary thing in my life, living as closely to Jesus' walk as I can. Being gay, if you're not rejective of it, it's great. My family has always been super, but I'm looking for a home, and I think I may have found it right here.
I think so. Absolutely.
I love that. Both of you guys. What a great story. My name is Carrie. I know most of you, some are new faces for sure. I think for me, and he did say 2 minutes, so I'll keep it to 2 minutes, but I'll try anyway. Essentially at 9 years old, I had an experience what led me to think that either I had done something wrong or I was having thoughts that I shouldn't have had, and I don't know why or where, but the point is, it began my struggle then. And from that point on, I kind of was told that everybody experiences things, etc. And I thought, well, maybe it's just a thing, like a phase or something like that. But when I was 9, I actually was also saved and baptized and grew up in a Southern Baptist church, by the way. I am recovering, as Tim says. I love that one. It's very true. It's very true. Because unfortunately, a lot of damage came from the church. A lot of damage came from condemnation. Something's wrong with me. Those feelings really do come from the people who represent Jesus. And that, as crushing as it is, I ended up getting married. I had a couple of boys. And I lived the life that I should live as a Christian, really double-hearted for a long, long time, trying to be the way I thought that I had to be good in God's eyes, because I loved him and I knew that he loved me and he created me, but I thought maybe something was wrong. And fast forward to not that long ago, in a Lakeland church that I wanted to make sure my boys were raised in, a church with good Christian men that were going to represent Christ and the way it needed to be. And I kept getting into leadership, and I loved it. I was head of the children's ministry, and it was one of my favorite things. We had a lot of fun, and until I brought a girlfriend of mine. I'm an actual girlfriend, not a friend of mine, a girlfriend. And they knew. And then I was asked to step down for ministry. And I was asked by a pastor who is a friend, and I really thought that he loved me. And long story short, he asked me to step down just because it's basically business, right? So what would the other parents say? And I thought, well, how could that, if I talk to a child, it makes you feel like you have a disease, that you can't be, like your presence or your just being around somebody would cause them to then be tainted. And so you feel very ostracized. And that's not what the church is supposed to be. And the same church that says everyone's welcome, the same church where the pastors did go up and explain what they struggle with, but for me, this struggle was a thorn in my side, is basically what the pastor said, and I just needed to basically pray it away. So, I went through this a couple times. I kept trying it, going back, okay, let me get it together. And I visioned me standing on a stage, talking to other women to help them get through their struggles and get straight again. To the point of realizing that God really called me to help other women realize that he loves them through and through, who he created them to be, gay, straight, or whatever. Thank you. I'm going to introduce my wife, and I'm going to ask for somebody to bring her a box of tissues. No joke, I'm serious, Tim. If there's any tissues in the house, yeah.
We're working on it.
I didn't like your story. Good morning, everyone. My name's Michelle Valdez. My story is, I don't know, it's my own story. So I grew up strict Catholic, Catholic church, Catholic priests, Hispanic at that, even worse. I was forced to have people pray over me, sit in a chair, all that, the whole Catholic, trying to change your mind and all that good stuff. So I would, go to different churches in my community, and I was being tolerated going to these churches. My mom, would go to these churches as well, even though we raised, strict Catholic. I never found a church that I was comfortable in. I was always okay to come and visit, but I was never allowed to partake in activities or be a part of anything at church. So growing up strict Catholic like that, them trying to convert me back, I ended up getting married, my first marriage, young. And then I married someone that had parents that were Jehovah's Witnesses. So one extreme to the other, right? Why not? Give it a shot. So 20 years into that marriage, I knew going in that her parents were Jehovah's Witnesses. We had to hide that we were dating, this whole thing, and somehow I married her. And then, we met with her parents. We'd do outings with her parents, but it was very known that, we weren't supposed to like hug in public and show any type of affection towards one another. And at that point I had long hair. So, that back then I was getting judged with long hair. But I was called pervert, all these other things by marrying this other person by the parents. And then she had her own issues of religion. Like she never wanted to go to church and never wanted to explore it because it was, what we were being called and what we were not supposed to do. And it was very traumatizing. So starting out my trauma, being straight Catholic, being that raised, and then getting in a relationship with someone that just did not want anything to do with faith or believing in anything was kind of hard. And then I remarried Carrie. Not remarried, I married Carrie. And since I've met Carrie, Carrie has been very open with me, and I've told her about my traumas that I've faced. And we actually found out there was an affirming church. And let me wind back to her story. So when she started telling her story, I started crying because I have a problem coming to church, as some of y'all know. But I want you to know that I'm very comfortable at this church, and I'm very proud to tell anyone that I come to this church, because to have an affirming church like this one in Lakeland is very important to me and probably to others as well, because there's not churches in Lakeland or Polk County that will say, come in, have a place in our church, feel at home in our church, because all the other churches you're being tolerated. And what I mean by being tolerated is, hey, you could come in, give on the plate, and then you got to go. Like, that's not loving. It doesn't give a warm, fuzzy feeling. And every time I've gone to church and it hasn't been an affirming one, I've always been turned away, or you can't stay here, you can't have part. So you can't lead her. So it's been a hard road, and my mom tried to kill me when I was young in the tub, and, because of the whole religion thing. But, it's just, that's the story. But since coming to Beacon Hill, I remember the first time I came for the Ethos statement, I sat in the back, and probably for the first 6 weeks, I probably cried every time that Ethos statement came on. And it was very important for me to see that statement when I came in here. And yeah, I love coming here, and I need to come more, but those are my struggles. I'm just letting y'all know.
I appreciate it. Absolutely. Let me say, I appreciate their willingness to share these stories. Some of these are very intimate and personal stories. And I'll tell you one thing. I know a lot of people who are gay and lesbian, LGBTQ across the board who demonstrate a commitment to faith that most of us would not have had. If we'd have been rejected and called names and other horrible things said about us, we'd have just hit the door, not let the door hit us in the rear end as we were leaving, and never come back to a church again. But the fact of the willingness of people to be tenacious enough to hold on to faith in the face of the kind of sometimes just emotional persecution they've experienced says something that we ought to all listen to, I believe. Well, I want to open the floor to anybody here who might have a question. I'll try to repeat your question, and then we'll let anybody who wants to address it do so without calling anybody or requiring anybody to do it. But as you're thinking about your question, I do want to ask one question for you if you would like to address. June 26, 2015, we just celebrated the 9th anniversary of the Obergefell versus Hodges Supreme Court decision that basically recognizes a constitutional right, as a constitutionally recognized right to marry, regardless of your sex. Same-sex marriage is now legal in all U.S. states, and states must recognize another state's marriage of people who are gay or same-sex partners. You'd like to address how that decision affected you and how you feel about it today. What does that mean? Mm-hmm.
I would like to address that. Having grown up in the church that I did, marriage was a very big thing. The church as the bride of Christ was a very sacred thing. And when my partner and I, we've been together for 35 years, and even after that decision, we had a struggle of trying to determine if we were actually crossing a sacred line that we just shouldn't cross. Mm-hmm. Now, we had been, all of our lives, we had talked about the day when we might be able to get married, but we had, thought it was some ethereal thing. And when it did happen, it was like, wow, And then it took us from then until 2018, we married on our 29th anniversary here in Lakeland at the courthouse. And that was, even within my family, it was, my sister said to me, well, now you need to explain this to people as a legal thing and not a religious thing, because you know that we are the bride of Christ, and this is the only way that works.
Right.
The only thing that I think my family has ever stood against in my life, they have always been super supporting. But this was a very hard space for them. And I mean, for myself too, as I was trained, it's a very sacred thing. So now it feels wonderful to be able to say, no, this man is my spouse. He is my husband. He is, if I go to the doctor, this is the person that's responsible for me. If I'm not able to be responsible for myself, this is him. So it's a good thing. It's a good feeling.
Sure. Anybody else want to address this?
So like I said, the first time, my first marriage was about 21 years. When that law actually passed, we thought about getting married, but we kind of hesitated because how do we know it's going to stay in effect? So we didn't jump on the bandwagon that first year when everybody was like all excited getting married, good for them. I was not one of those because I was like, how long is this really going to last? And in the back of my mind was like, am I crossing that line as well? So that came into my thoughts as well. And then probably 3 years or 4 years after that, we ended up getting married. But it was actually after a horse injury, and I wasn't allowed in the emergency room, and she was losing blood. Her parents came in and was like, we don't want her to have a blood transfusion because of the Jehovah's Witness thing. So she was about to die over a horse injury, a broken leg. So, yeah.
Yeah, wow. Oh, sorry. Anybody else? Okay. Anybody have a question you'd like to ask? Anybody? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it does. I mean, most of us would not be asked to come up here and talk about our faith and sexuality and how that, we just not do it. I struggled with, should I do this kind of thing or not? But I think it's important to hear from people who've had the experience so that we can better empathize with it and think through it. But I think sometimes we don't think through it from the perspective of people who've actually experienced the reality of these things. Anybody else with a question? Yeah, go ahead, Kate. Let me say this out loud so it can be heard, because I've asked for permission. This will go out on our YouTube page. What does it feel like to have to hide your identity from people in your family, your church, or other social relationships?
I'm going to combine that last question about marriage that you said, Tim, with your question, and thank you for that. Being able to get married, for me, it's hard to explain really into words, but it really does seal the deal. It allowed me to set and be completely open. And when that completely open it's very, very vulnerable, because we do. And there's a lot of people that won't talk to me. We just had a very good birthday party this weekend with a lot of my close friends that I've had for 20-something years, but they are also some of them are part of the church, the non-denominational church that I was a part of, that I can't be. And so it's hard. We love you, but we don't love your sin conversation. And I heard that so many times I can't even count. But as scary as it was, and my conversation with people today is being able to do that, getting married and publicly, has been such a freeing time. And being able to do that and ignore as much as I can, all of the chastising comments and the judgments when we walk in. There's no question. And honestly, I can walk in and somebody will not judge me just by looking at me immediately, but they immediately judge me if I'm walking with her. And when she walks in first, I sometimes walk behind her to watch them. And it is crushing. It's probably the most crushing thing I've got, so that I got to deal with. So having said that, as hard as it is, I just usually praise anybody who does have the courage to come out and explain that there is also freedom in that. And it's the freedom that we get with Christ too. We can't even put it into words.
Right.
Christ. I would like to say this. At this point in my life, I don't hide. There was a time that especially when I was going through the discovery phase. I mean, I was still I was in college, and a very strict Baptist college, so we didn't talk about that at all. And I really didn't hear a lot about it growing up, other than, whispers. Yeah. But anyway, I don't hide. I'm not hiding anymore. I love my husband. I'll tell anybody he's my husband. and I feel very right in that love, and it's my love. And I don't feel that I have to be afraid of anyone for that love. And as you said, you shall know the truth. Well, you know the truth about me now. It should set you free.
So your question in terms of like what it's like to hide and not be yourself, I think that when people hide that part of them, and any part of them, I think that it holds back from their personality. Like, I'm not able to truly be myself when I'm essentially lying, right? And I don't think lying sits well with anyone, but when you do that, it takes away from other parts as well. Yeah, and now I don't hide. I don't always lead with that foot, but when it comes up, I will say my wife, like early on, it just like as if I were saying my husband, or like anything. Right. I don't, try and I don't like to make a big deal out of it. It's just that's who I love.
So like Carrie was saying, she usually walks in first. She looks like an average straight person, I guess, if that's what you would call one. But in reference to your question about hiding, I'll walk in behind her and automatically the looks change. There are certain places I will not go to, and I will carry my weapon with me because it's come to that. I've been attacked out in public. I've had cans thrown at me, spit out of a truck as I'm walking by. And that's when I actually had long hair. Yeah, when I had long hair. So there's, like the party that we went to, there's certain people that I just steer away from. I won't even go up to them because I know when I walked across the room, they gave me some stare. I also lived in a town nearby where people in my circle knew who I was and what relationship I had, but I was not allowed to sit next to one or sit next to my ex-spouse anywhere or look like we were in a relationship. So the last 20-something years of my life, I had to hide. We would never eat anywhere in that local town. We would travel 3 miles out to go to have dinner so we wouldn't be seen. Not that we were like making out in public, because that was never our forte, because we were always taught to hide our affection and all that stuff. But it is hard. So now when I walk in, people judge me to a whole new level. Like, besides judging me that I'm gay, now it's judging because, damn, she's a gay, bald person at that. So, like, give those double whammies. So I'm facing a wall every time I walk in somewhere. And sometimes I walk in great spirit, shoulders back, smile like I tell the kids. And sometimes I'm like, how long are we going to be here? So, yeah, it's that kind of situation. And it hurts inside that you're not able to be yourself.
Any other questions? Gene in the back, go ahead, and I'll repeat it. Okay, let me rephrase it so it can be heard. The question is, for those who have former spouses and are children, I presume, with a previous spouse, how are you accepted, or how does that go now? If you'd like to talk about that. It may be too personal to talk about, but...
Well, it's not too personal. It's a long story, but I won't go into that. But I will say, for me, that was one of my biggest struggles, because I do have 2 boys that have to deal with the same thing I have to deal with, because your family is affected. And I didn't want them to be affected. So I hid a friendship that was more than a friendship for quite some time. And when I did have to come out because it was important for them to know, and what the situation at the time, it was really, really hard for one of my boys to accept, and he was still struggling over the fact that I wasn't with his father. So, there was layered on top, right? And so the struggle is definitely as a parent who has children who didn't get to have children with their spouse of the same sex, because that is a different, battle that you have. It is definitely a lot. And the ex-husband has been the surface levels a lot of people are of not beating up because I was a good mom, right? And he couldn't say much of that, but it's definitely been hard, and the struggles are definitely real when it comes to having children. And ex-spouses, it is hard no matter what. Any ex is hard, right? More than one is definitely hard, but much less when you add that extra on there. It has been probably because they just assume that I'm straight because I did have a husband and I did have children. So there's a lot of assumptions that go on.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
My ex-spouse of 20-something years, the Jehovah's Witness family, I feel like I've missed out on having a child, because in that relationship or marriage, I was not allowed to have a child. We had went and asked her parents, and they were like, that's not the right thing to do. You can't have a child. Certain things were said that, hurt inside. And I still sit with that because I feel like I missed out. But now I have a wonderful grandbaby. But it was a thing. We weren't, because her parents were so strong on that, it ate my spouse's brain to where we were never going to have a child together. And that type of deal.
Yeah. All right. Good. Are you going to? Okay. All right. You don't have anything to add to that, right? Uncle, I got you. All right. Anybody have any other questions on this? Go ahead, Mary. All right. All right. Well, very good. Absolutely. For those who on the video, there was not a question, but it was simply a comment about how that we put into we straitjacket men's and women's roles. I think we've talked about in the past month how that gender and gender expression is a lot more complicated than we think. Would any of you like to address the subject about this? How do you feel pressure as gay couples to fit some sort of role within the dynamic? What is that like? I mean, maybe a strange way to express it, but do you ever struggle with that? How does this fit as being married? Because one thing I notice as a pastor is there's plenty of stuff out there talking about what it's like for a heterosexual couple to be married or to engage in married life. Not as many resources, because it's so relatively new in this country to navigate the dynamics of a role within a gay marriage, a same-sex couple marriage. Would you like to talk about that?
Okay, I'll give that a stab. Jerry and I have been together for 35 years. We've known one another for 40. The question often came up, well, which of you is the wife?
Right.
Which was hilarious to me. We're both men, and we both have abilities to, cook and clean and change babies' diapers and all of these wonderful things. And none of them really have to do with gender or a gender role for that matter. Jerry and I are both cisgender males. We are in many ways stereotypically male. But that has always been a looming question, which of you, runs the kitchen, and
Right.
And it's kind of insulting, as if we were so limited,
Right.
Mentally and emotionally, that we couldn't cut the mustard as one or the other.
Right.
But that's the way I see that.
I think that in any relationship, whether you're straight, gay, whatever, I think that communication is really important in your relationship, and figuring out what those roles are going to be, no matter what relationship you're going to be in, and discussing expectations and, you know, what you expect of the other person, what you're expected, you know, to give, and kind of finding a balance on, you know, your role. And also that's fluid too, you know, sometimes, you know, one person might clean a little bit more, one might, you know, cook a little bit more, whatever it is. And I think that goes for any relationship. I don't think that that's like a specific, you know, gay relationship that, you know, both people have to cook, both people have to clean. I think that in a straight relationship, the man can cook sometimes, you know, and clean sometimes. I think that it's just with, as they should. Yes, thank you. But my point being is that I think that everyone can do most things in any relationship.
I just need you to say, and I'm only saying this out of love, and she knows I'm going to say it, but it is funny because we get the same thing, and it's definitely, and they use the word butch, which is something she doesn't like at all, and it doesn't really, but it is hard because there is a lot of assumptions, and yes, we can all do all things, right? So I worked on engines, and she's raced cars, but we've definitely, she cooks really, really well, just to be clear, she is Cuban, but so I prefer her to do that, just so we're clear. I'm like, yay, somebody else can do it. Having said that, though, we definitely take, same thing, right? Like all relationships we're human, right? So we have to do with human expectations and human feelings and all of those things. And so no matter where you're at, but most definitely people automatically think that she would be more of the stereotypical male role, which is literally the opposite in our household. I don't have the tissues in front of me, to be clear. So, right, like it, and I love every bit of that for her, right? So, and I'm just grateful for the fact that I don't have to worry about it being a specific, you know what I mean? That drives me crazy. So, yes, we can all do all things. Thank you, Tim.
Good. Yeah, I think one of the good things about thinking through these things, I mean, what gay or lesbian couples and our greater exposure to people who are trans is to help us to think, you know, some of the things we used to think was so fixed about gender expression and so forth and roles were really just kind of made up rules anyway. They weren't basic to being human. They're just kind of the ways that our culture said this is the way things are supposed to be. And we kind of like, okay, I guess we got to do that. Or in some cases, men just said, yeah, we like to keep it that way because too often that has happened. So this whole all these questions have been good for us, or can be good for us, to all of us, to rethink why do we do the things that we do? Why do we expect certain things the way they should be? So thank you for your input. We got out of time, but I want to give everybody just one brief final word and answer or address this question. What can the Beacon Hill Fellowship, or churches in general, but I'll just use the Beacon Hill Fellowship, do to be more welcoming and affirming to people who are LGBTQ plus as a congregation? Anybody want to start that?
I'll start that. Actually, I think right now you folk are doing a wonderful job reaching out, being involved in the community. And you're not just involved in this community, you're involved in the whole community, which I adore. But the thing with gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender, QIA plus, you have to realize that most of us have some sort of PTSD that comes from having grown up in church, having been involved in church, and then being disinvolved, sometimes radically. So always keep Jesus first, the love of Christ first, and then invite people. Bring them in, you know, non-judgmental, and do what you do here. This is beautiful. I thank God for you.
I think for me, the biggest thing is just stating that you're affirming. I found Beacon Hill because I saw that PFLAG was hosted here. And on the website, it says that everyone is welcome and affirmed as a child of God. And for me, that's what I look for.
Exactly, Carly. The affirming thing. So we actually used to drive before we found Beacon Hill, which is really weird. I don't know why we didn't find it first, but we were driving an hour and something, Lutz, to find an affirming church, because prior to that, I just thought that there was no non-denominational was the closest thing I was going to get, which is what I had a lot of bad experiences with. So I didn't even realize there was such a thing as affirming. So once I realized there's a hope, but then I also realized where I was located, and there was not much here outside of some other churches that don't really run with the faith that I have strongly in Jesus. I just thought there's nothing until we happened to find it, but it is not very well posted and known in the community. As much as we get out there as Beacon Hill Fellowship, and as a member, I can say I am so grateful to be part of this church, who definitely represents and shows, especially when you come in. We've never been so accepted anywhere than here. To note that, please, because it's been amazing. But also, I do believe that we need to maybe do more of that as far as like a social media, which is what people use today, right? And the website and Facebook. I think we do some. I think we should just do a little bit more to
Are you
let
all
people
following
know.
our Facebook page?
Let people know we're.
If you are, there's a lot on there about it.
There is, especially this month. We got a lot going on. But I don't think it's really as much as that as it is us telling people, right? And I guess your circle may not be that, though, so it might be harder to really share with people that might not be in that same circle. So I don't know. Maybe it's just sharing that. I don't know what more that Beacon Hill could do, honestly. A lot of churches, well, we don't have time for that, really. So.
Yep.
I want to make sure I answer it correctly.
No. What can Beacon Hill Fellowship do to be more welcoming and affirming to LGBTQ plus people?
Don't change the affirming part.
No.
Don't change. Keep doing what you guys are doing. Like I said, this is the first church I've felt welcome in. And somebody asked me, well, what's your criteria for your church? I'm like, there's none. Come as you are. And that's the easiest thing I could say to someone. But just know that getting the stubborn gay community in here is going to take some work, because we've been burnt. We've been burnt not one time, but 2 times, but maybe 5, 6, 7 times, like myself. And it takes time to heal here first before, I feel guilty when I come to church because I feel like my relationship with God is not right. But it feels right when I walk in through the doors, and I know that I don't have to think about it, and that no one's judging me, and I'm able to sit here and have that peace. So don't change the affirming part, and just if you see somebody out, see if Pope Pride could give you guys some it's called safe space stickers. So, and if you're in a neighborhood, I would tell you to kind of put it in the window. It's not like super bright or anything like that, but if you're a gay person and you're walking by, that's a safe space. And I love places that have that, because it just means, hey, no matter how you are, you're welcome. It's love here in this door, no matter what. So don't change the affirming part, and I feel like me and Carrie need to work more on the social media part to get some more of our peers in here, because they're stubborn like us. So just want to let you guys know that, and I love all you guys. Thank you for coming every Sunday.
All right, we appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks to everybody. Give them a hand. I appreciate their willingness to do this. It certainly takes courage to talk out loud in the world we live in today, but we all need to see this is not about politics mostly. This is not an issue. This is about people's lives. People's lives. And I hope the Beacon Hill Fellowship will continue. I'm thankful for the members of this congregation who stand along with me in making sure this is a welcoming and affirming place, and working to get that message out, and trying to get other congregations to come along with us and to move more in this direction. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but it won't be done unless people are willing to do it. And so this month we've tried to emphasize this as much as ever, because we live in a world where as much progress has been made, there's always a backlash. And we're seeing that. And we do not want to take backward steps. We want to make forward steps. And the way to do that is that people need to make sure that our voices are at least as loud as the people who are trying to react, oppose, and regress. And that's why we need to be willing to speak up and speak out and make sure our voices are heard. Because there's a young child, there are young children coming up in a world that will have hopefully a better opportunity to not experience so much trauma as previous generations. And that won't happen unless people like us speak up about it and try to create that world. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being willing to come up. You can go back if you want to your seats. We're going to have a song, I think, right? Come on, Jason. And I won't say much more about what we just experienced, but I hope you'll express your appreciation personally to our panel members, so that they'll know that they were indeed appreciated for taking this courageous step to share with us. And us continue to work as we move forward together as Christians, hand in hand, in love. Let me emphasize a few things by way of announcement. There'll be some things that we'll scroll through. One thing I want to give you, this is the latter part of the year. We've taken a break for the month of July on our Lunch and Learn. But on August the 14th, Lisa Miller, Polk County School Board member, will come and share about her work at the Polk County School Board for our Lunch and Learn. And then Rabbi David Goldstein of Temple Emmanuel will share September the 11th on that Wednesday. And Anita Carlson of Equality, Florida on October the 16th. I have one on for November 13th, but not quite confirmed yet, so I'll get that to you as soon as possible. For those of you who participate in our Lunch and Learn, we wish more of you would if you could. We hope you will look forward to these opportunities to hear from people in our community about problems we all need to face together. Next, there's something that we're going to work on. This is a documentary. Perhaps some of you have heard of it, God and Country. It's specifically a documentary about the rise of Christian nationalism in the United States. Rob Reiner, I think, helped produce this and perhaps directed it. But we're looking for an opportunity to show this in very soon, perhaps July, the beginning of August. And we're going to try to find out how many of you are interested in viewing this together as a group and having a discussion about it afterwards. And the way we're going to do it is there's a sign-up sheet, I think, on the back table that you can sign your name if you're interested in being a part. And note, there's 2 time slots. We're thinking about doing it maybe on a Saturday afternoon, about 3 p.m., get everybody home before it gets dark, while the daylight's still long, or maybe a Sunday afternoon where we'll have church, break for lunch, and come back in the afternoon. So write on there or note on there if you sign your name and you're interested in participating in this, watching this documentary movie, and make sure you vote on which time slot would be better for you, because we won't be able to please everybody, but we're trying to find the most number possible to come and see this and to talk about it. I think it is very important. Next week we'll have a trailer that you can see of this movie. It is a very important one, I think, for our time, and especially in an election year. We don't endorse candidates, we don't endorse parties, but we do think there are important issues that have to do with faith and our relationship to one another in our society. I think you'll find this interesting, those of you who know anything about the rise of Christian nationalism in this country. All right, let's take up our offering, or receive our offering. I'll offer a prayer before we do. Gracious God, thank you for all the things we richly enjoy. Now, as we return a portion of it to you through this congregation, may our church always use it with integrity, with wisdom and skill to help your inbreaking kingdom, your inbreaking rule become a greater reality in the hearts and minds of more people, more places. For Christ's sake, amen. I hope you followed through the announcements as we scroll through them. One to take note of, we're getting that time of the year, beginning with July, where we do our back-to-school supply drive, and so be thinking about that. Our deadline to turn those all in to be July the 28th. So be thinking about that as you're out shopping. Maybe pick up some items that are appropriate for school supplies. There's a list on the back table, I believe, that you can look over if you want to know specifically what the kinds of things we're looking for. All right? Thank you so much for being a part of our service today. Will you please stand and make sure you tell somebody before you leave you love them and you think about them and pray for them. And as we conclude our service, we're going to do so with a song.
All right.